This will be a very exciting panel with a phenomenal list of panelists with us. Let me start by introducing them. While we're waiting for a mic, perhaps a handheld one, please. I'll start to my right with Minister Dudaka, Minister of Economic Planning and Cooperation in Senegal. Delighted to have you. On my left, our host, Minister of Finance, who has been our also brilliant chair, Minister in Cuba, Minister of Finance and Investment Promotion. I also have the delight of having on the panel the UNECA Secretary General, Ms. Rebecca Greenspan, and we're delighted to have Her Excellency Minister Vaz from Cabo Verde, who will also join the panel. Can we please have a handheld mic? Okay. Meanwhile, let me just start by just putting very briefly in context what we will be discussing today. We have already had discussions on this issue and the fact that we have been, Africa has been seeing a series of global shocks that have really led to over of hard-earned progress on SDG. We have seen a change in the landscape also. Over the last 15 years, there has been a large decline in terms of availability of concessional finance, which led countries to take more debt, commercial, private, and on a capital market. And with the global financial conditions tightening and turning and going to a new norm, now really this becomes much more challenging to keep that trend with a much higher cost of the debt that really eats up resources that can be used either for climate action or even for SDG investment. So today's panel will discuss these issues. I'd like to start with Rebecca, but let me say that today I have a very difficult job in this panel, which is with such a brilliant speakers and VVIPs to keep you on time. So if you forgive me in advance for doing that, but I'd like to start with Rebecca to ask her, what do you see as the major challenges in the global financial architecture to have a just and fair one, and the key areas that Africa can push to get action on these reforms? And the second part that I wanted to ask you, given on that focus, the importance of trade and investment for Africa, what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities for the continent? Can I ask you to do this job in 5 to 6 minutes, please? I'll let you try your best.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here with the family of the UN in the Economic Commission of Africa. So thank you very much, Hanan, for the great work, and thank you very much to my friend Claver Gatete at the head of ECA. So we are working a lot together, and I think that there are many things we can do. So since we are going to talk about the challenges, let me start by saying that I really believe in the potential of Africa. Because many times when we talk about the challenges, we don't talk about the opportunities, yes? And let me start by the first question in terms of what do we need from the international financial system, and what are the main reforms. And let me just start by saying that the problems that we have in terms of liquidity, in terms of investment, and in terms of debt are all being driven by high interest rates and very costly capital. And I think that is the main problem that we also have to tackle. So the first thing that we have to do is to have, as has been said here, more financing that is long-term and affordable. I don't say concessional because I say affordable, because at the end we have this discussion of what is concessional. Is concessional to go below the rate that Africa is getting, or is just more justice to go below the rate that Africa is getting because of the high risk attached to Africa that many times doesn't have the fundamentals for it. So I prefer to talk about affordable than to talk about concessional. And the problem is that the international system is too small to the challenge. I always give this number. The World Bank is today 1/5 of what it was to the global economy when it was created in the 60s, 1/5. So the public, affordable, long-term resources that we could get from the international system have shrinked with respect to the challenge that we have. And so what we need is to scale up. So there is where the reform that has been put forward for the multilateral development banks is so important. First of all, we need better banks, but we need also bigger banks in the multilateral development financial system. So the target that we have put in the UN is 500 billion, fivefold of what is happening today. For that, we need to get better, but we also need more capitalization of the banks. Now, we need banks that are better in the sense that they have to crowd in private investment. We know that even if they are bigger, they won't be enough. We need to crowd in private investment. But the main problem with private investment is the perception of risk. So I'm sorry to say, we need a real conversation with the credit rating agencies. And that conversation has to take place with the IMF and the World Bank. And when we talk to the credit rating agencies, that's what they say, that the dialogue with the World Bank and with the IMF is essential. So if we want to tackle that problem, we need to do that also. The other issue is to rechannel SDRs through the multilateral development banks. The African Development Bank has put forward a very credible program that is very serious, it's robust, and if we channel the SDRs through the multilateral development banks, $1 will be $5. In the IMF, $1 is $1. And it has been difficult to get the loans through the RST, as you said today, Hanan, in the morning. So the RST is a very good innovation, but it has to get better to get the money out of the door for the countries that need it.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I think very well said. And this is some of the things we have been trying to actually work with African ministers on to develop that unified voice and consensus, which we have built through resolutions, through the African Union mechanism and so on. And you know, this is the issue of getting that to action and pushing the agenda. Thank you so much. If I can turn to His Excellency, Minister Kube, and ask you, about last year, the African Development Bank called for partners to work with Zambia to address debt arrears and implement structural reforms to give us a sense of progress, and also, amid the rising debt vulnerabilities, what can African countries do to mobilize more resources for development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope it's loud enough. And I agree with everything that Rebecca Greenspan has said. Let me start there. I agree. But coming to the question, Hanan, Zimbabwe, like most African countries now, is reeling under the debt distress. So we initiated a process where we can resolve this debt issue. We are in arrears in terms of our debt service, but we've been making token payments to all the 17 Paris Club partners, bilateral partners, and to the IFIs. So we're making the token payments, and we paid off our debt with the IMF, so we don't owe the IMF anything, and work very well with them. So coming to the process that we started, we basically sought the services of a champion, being Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, working with the high-level facilitator, the former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano, as a high-level facilitator. And we sought really to come up with a roadmap for dealing with Zimbabwe's debt arrears issue. We organized ourselves this way. We said, look, what we need in the room is all the creditors, the bilateral creditors and the IFI creditors, not necessarily private sector for now, and then obviously government. And then we organized ourselves this way. We created 3 tracks that would then really focus on key reforms that we thought are necessary for us to get to a point where we are at one and are aligned with our creditors. So we created a track for economic reforms, which is co-chaired by Treasury, the IMF, and the World Bank. And then we have got a track on governance reforms, which is chaired by the EU and the Minister of Justice in Zimbabwe. And then a 3rd track dealing with land issues and also farmer compensation issues in Zimbabwe. So because we have that history of having acquired land, and now we're in the process of compensating the farmers for improvements of that land. So we've got a track on that, which is co-chaired by Switzerland and the Office of the President and UNDP. So we've got a process that involves us as government and the creditor countries. Things have gone well. So far we've had 5 meetings in terms of our the engagements at the technical level. Our technical committees meet and they produce reports. There's very, very good progress. And then also we've had 3 high-level sessions that involved Dr. Adesina and Chissano and our own president, Mnangagwa. We'll be having the next meeting soon, to carry on with this process. Where we are now as well, we have come up with a policy metrics for each of the 3 buckets: economic reforms, governance, land, and farmer compensation. So 3 buckets, and then we have matrices on the back of that with targets that are being tracked. The IMF completed this mission. It's an Article 4 mission a couple of weeks ago, which was very successful, and now they're coming back to Zimbabwe to prepare for a staff monitoring program where we're working on the various targets that we need to achieve during the 1 year of an SMP program. This SMP program, because we're in arrears, it will be what we call a virtual wet SMP. Virtual wet in the sense that it won't be directly funded through IMF resources, but rather funded through key programs that we've outlined with our bilateral partners. So things around climate, food security, social protection, agricultural sector support, education, health. So we have the buckets ready. As long as we get funding through those streams during the implementation of the staff monitoring program, it constitutes a virtual wet SMP. We're comfortable with that. So we hope that then by June this year, we'll have signed off on the staff monitoring program. We do about 12 months. At the end of that, we review, and then we get to a point where then we can attract sponsors, because we need sponsors to give us the bridge financing. Usually you need it's a 24-hour loan that you need for that bridge financing in order to clear the arrears. It's a technical process. And this is the traditional way of clearing arrears that I'm describing. Of course, the plan B, the non-traditional, is if you have got resources from elsewhere, you pay off everybody. But when you do that, then you will be constrained in stage 2, which is negotiations with the Paris Club bilaterals. They will not be happy there because of the paro passu treatment and so forth. So we still want to work through the traditional approach. So it's looking good. Then let me just say maybe just one last word on that issue on the farmer compensation issues. That what we've agreed with the farmers is a payment. We have two streams of farmers. We've got Zimbabwe citizens farmers. It's about 4,000 of them. And then we have got farmers who came in to invest as foreign investors and are covered through BIPAs, the Bilateral Investment Protection Agreements. So the first group, we agreed on a compensation amount of $3.5 billion US. And we have structured it has taken us a long time, more than 10 years of negotiations, but finally it's done. So each farmer will be issued with a 10-year bond, paying a 1% coupon for whatever we owe them. We've valued all these farms. The farmers were also thorough. They kept data on Google Maps going back to year 2000. So they have the data. So all we had to do was to verify it, and it's correct. We can see the farm buildings, the deep tanks, the fences, and we value all of that, $3.5 billion, which was negotiated. So we're going to pay these farmers through this bond instrument, and really they've accepted this, and we're pleased that this is so. But it's also an opportunity. Can you imagine unleashing a $3.5 billion bond market in Zimbabwe? So you can see again, it might create an opportunity for capital market development. So it's not just a liability, but it's also an opportunity if we use it well. Let me stop there for that first question. Let me transition then to the question of domestic resource mobilization, which how we can raise extra resources through domestic means. In Zimbabwe, we've really tried hard to be innovative because of limited, borrowing space globally because of our arrears. The first thing I did as Minister of Finance in 2018, in fact, I remember actually, it was a Sunday, and I'd just been appointed minister. I went back to Switzerland to pack my bags to come and really resume properly. And I was lying in bed, it was a Sunday, and I was thinking, how do we close that deficit of 11% of GDP, which I found in 2018? How do we do that? So believe it or not, the intermediated money transfers tax, those who are from Zimbabwe, was conceived when I was lying in bed in Switzerland on one Sunday morning, basically. So I took advantage of the mobile money penetration in Zimbabwe and introduced a 2% tax on all electronic transactions with a cap, but also with some, exemptions. So it's not, you don't pay for that. So that was an innovation, and that innovation was very, very helpful to a point where in 2020, Hanan, during COVID, we actually had $200 million in the bank. So we're able to buy our vaccines without a hitch. That's why you find that our COVID response was so strong, because we had cash in the bank. Why? We had extra resources, and that tax came in very handy. So that's just one area. The other area is we are trying to figure out, like everybody, how to get more resources from the informal sector. So 2 years ago, I introduced a location tax. So what happens is, so as long as an informal sector player is operating from a known address, it could be this hall, you've got 200 of them, each of them with a stall, they're selling their wares. This address is known, someone owns it, and they charge them rent, right? That's exactly what you go for. So you designate the owner of the building a tax collector, an agent, by law. So they're required to collect from each of the players in the room some presumptive amount. We set it, I think, at $1 US a day or something. So that was one way to deal with informalization. I'm aware that there are other better models in other countries. Recently, we've also introduced a sugar content tax in beverages. So there's a tax on beverages of 0.01 US dollars per gram of sugar content. It's not a tax on sugar. I want to be clear. We're not taxing production, we're taxing consumption and behavior. And those resources will be ring-fenced particularly for the health sector to deal with NCDs, non-communicable diseases, cancer, and so forth. Let me leave taxes alone. Let me come to capital markets, because we're very keen as well to deepen and develop capital markets as a source of financing. But it's not easy to develop a fixed income market in Africa. When inflation is volatile and exchange rates are volatile, it's difficult to establish a very clean and clear yield curve. But we're making progress. But we've moved faster on the equity front, and we've established a second stock exchange here in Victoria Falls called the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, which is US dollars only, again to encourage a raising of capital through the securities market. But on the bond market, it's a lot slower, but we have a couple of corporate bonds that have been launched, and government will also be following up on that. I'm just highlighting a few. The last one is on climate finance. I cannot resist this. We've come up with a framework for regulating carbon markets in Zimbabwe. We also learned from other countries around the world. We've done our first deal in terms of within the voluntary market. So we've been able to structure a deal where we'll raise development finance from selling carbon credits. I hope we'll get a good price out of that. So we're splitting revenues 70% for the developer and 30% for government. But we want to make sure that the communities are not left behind. So something will be left behind for the communities that maybe are growing trees or forests, so that we don't leave anyone behind. So carbon finance is something that we should promote going forward. But we need skills. We need also the private sector players in the carbon markets are really, really smart, and they understand the market. Let's make use of them. That's what I've learned. They know who the buyers are. Be it VW, BMW, Google, they're all trying to reduce their emissions and carbon footprints. We make use of them. You've got auditors. I think there are 5 names that you have never heard of. It's not your usual KPMG, EY. It's other auditors, and we have to work with them. So we need those private sector skills to maximize on climate finance opportunities. I think what the contributor from Tanzania said resonates with me, particularly the issue of the declining grant flows to Africa. You are right, grants are in decline. What's more available is loan finance. Even that is in decline, and we need more grant funding because of the cost of borrowing. They've just gone up. And when the cost of borrowing, because of rising risk premiums, is higher than the rates of growth of our economies, then we know we're actually already accumulating more debt, because that gap between interest rates and growth is key in the debt accumulation aspect. One comment on, I couldn't quite catch who made this comment about whether the institutions are actually fit for purpose in the first place. I would go further and say, are the instruments fit for purpose, or they need to be refined? And this brings us back to the design of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, the RIST, which I think still needs fine-tuning, especially on the issue of interest rate caps, allowing middle-income countries to access equitably, all countries rank pari passu as far as climate change shocks are concerned, and just making, and again, I think easing the requirements on the upper credit tranche requirements in terms of access. I think this is an issue that was articulated by Hanan well this morning. And finally, with Morocco, your reference to the equitable financial architecture resolution Marrakesh, I was part of that meeting. Again, that resonates with the whole issue of reforming the global financial system. Thank you very much for those comments.
Thanks. It's really difficult, of course, for me to summarize the richness of this discussion. But let me, if I need to just mention like keywords of what we have been saying, is we need to have a affordable finance at scale, better and bigger multilateral development banks. We need to enable the rechanneling of IMF SDRs to MDBs to allow higher leverage. We need to also include the climate resilient clauses integrated in debt contracts. We need to bring the human aspects in the discussion, in the arguments, and raising the awareness and in advocacy. We need to tackle the issue of the risk perception and working also with credit rating agencies. And we need private sector involvement. We need to work in coordinated manner, collaboratively, and we need to really amplify the African voice. With this attempt to capture some of what we have said, I would like to sincerely thank the brilliant panel that we had and ask you to give them a round of applause, please. Thank you.